My dad served in the Air Force for over 20 years. He was part of a crew flying to Iceland through an exceptionally rough snowstorm. They got through the storm, but during the landing, the plane careened along the runway before it finally stopped. Everyone on board knew they were goddamn lucky to be alive. After they were debriefed, they headed to the nearest bar. The crew rallied around the shaken pilot, bonding over the near-death experience they just shared by not talking about the near-death experience they just shared. My dad tipped the MC to say, "That song was for the asshole who didn't know how to land that C-141 tonight." One crew member told my dad, "Harrison, you must chew glass to get so mean." If he did chew glass, it was because life served it to him. It was the only recipe he knew, so he served it to our family too. When my dad was 15, he ran away from home, bruised and bloodied from his latest abusive stepfather, and straight to the recruiter's office. He had to forge his birth certificate to enlist. After boot camp, my dad was assigned to work a detail near the ammunition stores. There was a misfire in the warehouse that exploded the building, killing 20 people. My dad was the only one to survive the catastrophe. When the medics arrived, he was ordered to help clear the bodies. He followed orders. He met my mother shortly after the accident. They married right away, and my brother arrived 7 months later. My two sisters arrived soon after my brother, Irish twins, 10 months apart. My parents were 21 with a family of 5. He was a firm disciplinarian with the girls. My brother, Charlie, bore the brunt of my dad's anger. He beat the shit out of my brother. Any bad day, any overcooked dinner, all the opportunities my dad thought he was missing out on were Charlie's fault. My mom never stopped my dad, but had ice packs ready in the freezer. My dad applied the military structure to our home and created his own rule book with tiered subsections of statutes and of appropriate and correct behavior, all drafted, reviewed, and ratified exclusively by him. Publication and circulation of the rule book was limited to the perimeter of wherever he was standing. This limited distribution channel meant even when we thought we were behaving ourselves, suddenly he would yell, "What are you, simple?" One major violation was to question his authority or expertise, or just to challenge him in any way. I didn't understand why he didn't have to do chores, since we all live here and have to do our part. When I asked him, he squinted his eyes at me and he pointed his index finger and said, "Because I shot the bear." I was 6. What the hell did that mean? Around the same time, one day he took me out to run errands with him. On our way home, he took me to the bar. I ordered a Shirley Temple and couldn't believe I was actually at the Lakeview Inn, the bar he went to every day after work. I was a chatty kid and eagerly talked to the bartender. I told him how he went shopping at the mall and looked at new cars. It's good to look at cars when the dealerships are closed. You can browse around and, without being hassled by salesmen. This guy thought just like my dad. And I was acting like a grown-up, contributing to a conversation. That's what he said, too. My father snarled, "Who's he?" I knew I did something wrong, but I didn't know what. I was so confused. "You're he?" He yelled at me. He told me how disrespectful I was. I was to say my dad, since he was present in the conversation. He moved my Shirley Temple so it was still in sight but out of my reach. I stared into my lap, wishing that I hadn't just ruined our whole day. "If you cry, we are leaving." I still didn't want the day to end, but I didn't know what to do, so I held my breath. He ordered me, "Raise your head, sit up straight." I was too afraid to look at him, too embarrassed to look at the bartender, so I stared across the room at a metal St. Pauli girl sign, wondering if drinking beer gave you big boobs. According to my dad's rule book, doling out cruelty was reserved for him and no one else. In the 6th grade, I had to sit next to Brian Froelich, who picked on me for no reason other than our proximity and my sensitivity. As a student, I was graded everything except math. Dividing fractions was so hard. When will I need 5/7 of anything? And when do I need to multiply it by 2/3? During the lesson, I could follow along, but when I had to do the work on my own, I would get so overwhelmed and start to cry. I knew how to cry silently, but Brian Froelich always saw me. he would whisper, "Math makes you cry." My mom learned about the teasing, and she confided to me that she knew Brian's mom from Al-Anon, a support group for spouses of alcoholics. The identity of a support group member is a huge secret to entrust to an 11-year-old. She told me to have compassion and to treat people the way I want to be treated because they have it worse than we do. That was the first time my mother lowered the pretense and acknowledged that our home was not okay. She told me when people are hurting, they do hateful things because that's what they've been taught. That didn't make any sense to me. Was there a school that taught teasing, like an after-school program? From then on, when Brian would whisper his taunts, I could ignore them for the most part. It was after school at the bike racks when he had an audience. That's what got to me. "Carol's a crybaby. She's so dumb, math makes her cry." I wanted to scream, "Your dad's a drunk too." But I couldn't out my family. And if I outed his, my mother would never forgive me. That afternoon, I got home, and it was strange that my dad was home so early. It was not strange that he was a 12-pack of Bud down. I told him how I was bullied, and he advised me, "The next time he starts with you, you hit him until someone makes you stop." After school the next day, it was the same scene, 15 kids unlocking their bicycles and rushing to undo my bike lock. I fumbled with it. "Oh, you can't get your bike unlocked. Oh, are you going to cry?" I took a deep breath and channeled my mom. "Brian, please don't talk to me like that." My plea fanned his fire. He kept at it, and the laughter of the other kids rioted. I raised my hands, and I let out this sound. Bah! I started pounding his face with both hands. My bike lock was in one of them. And it felt like an eternity before Mrs. Carrington came over. My dad passed out before the phone call started that night. I heard my mom on the phone with Brian's mom asking how he was. As my mom called around the neighborhood to see if anyone knew how to sew stitches, I learned that not everyone has health insurance and can go to the doctor. When the commotion subsided, my mom called her best friend, whose 3 kids watched me get teased all year. She lit her cigarette. I just don't know what got into her. In my sophomore year of college, I was 19. My parents had been separated for 5 years, and all of us were a lot happier. In the spring semester, my boyfriend was killed in a car accident. He was tired, and I talked him into staying out with me later than he wanted to. On his way home, he fell asleep at the wheel, colliding head-on with another car, killing himself and a 54-year-old grandmother. What I endured growing up was a scratch compared to this wound. My grief became a second skin. I couldn't wash it off. It fit so tight I couldn't move. 3 months after the accident, I still wasn't eating. My mom came home with groceries and presented me her offerings of food. I got some bananas, and peaches were on sale, and tomato soup. I have never liked tomato soup. I still don't. And I cannot believe that she would even for a second think that I would want that. "Mom, are you simple?" She could have hurled that can at my head, but she placed it on the counter like a porcelain collectible. She gave me a huge hug. When I stopped crying, still clinging to her, she slapped me on the back of my head and said, "You say that to me again, you can go live with your father."
Carol Harrison.